Hi, my name is Becky Duncan. I'm the Cyber Self-Defense Coach, and you are listening to Conversations with Pearl.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Won't you leave the clouds you're under? Ain't it funny how there ain't no rain? All clear. Why'd it take so long to leave you in the rearview mirror? Now nobody gonna steal my sunshine or turn my blue sky gray. All I know is at the end of the day, wildflowers grow when there ain't no shade.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl, and you are joining us here at Conversations with Pearl, and I am so excited to have you guys today. I'm even more excited about our amazing guest who's coming to us all the way from New Zealand, and her name is Becky Duncan. And just so you know, she is an amazing best-selling author. She's been featured in primetime TV on A Current Affair, Campbell Live, That's Life magazine, New Zealand Herald, Newstalk, RadioLive, and Radio New Zealand, amongst other pint media. This entrepreneur, Becky, she has over a decade experience in digital marketing, communications, and web development across corporate, government, not-for-profit startups. She's amazing at startup companies, you guys, and SME business markets. Until recently sold, she was founder and owner of my favorite little parties, and that's the largest kids slumber picnic party styling franchise in Southern Hemisphere, with over 10 franchises in Australia and New Zealand. Becky is growing up as a mixed race adoptee in an all-white family. So if those of you who know me, that's very dear to my heart. She battled insecurities, lacked a sense of belonging, and felt like she didn't have a voice. In 2013, after a business deal gone bad, she survived a very public and vicious cyber attack that started with one man and turned into hundreds of men online. Though she doesn't have the black eyes and the broken bones or the bloody gashes to show for it, the incidents affected her at every level, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Now, after 7 years in hiding, she's back. She's armed, and she's fueled by compelling belief that safety is a fundamental human right and shouldn't be a luxury for women online. Becky, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. It's a beautiful day here in New Zealand. And I'm just really excited to talk to you and to really uncover some of what we're going to talk about today. So yes, yay.
I'm so excited. So cyber self-defense coach. I love that. So, and I loved you shared too when we were talking about that Hunger Games online from that cyberbullying. So walk us through what happened, Becky, and what led you on the path where you are today. Let's just delve right into what happened.
Well, I've always lived my life out loud online for many, many years. I'm a serial online entrepreneur. I've had a best-selling novel. I've been, as you mentioned, on TV, radio, and papers all over. So living my life out loud where everyone can see was never an issue for me. I'm quite a vibrant, spontaneous type of person, and I like the limelight. I mean, I must admit, I do. I like the limelight. But what happened is about 7 years ago, I was developing a new online concept, and I often use like freelancer sites to do projects if I need coding or something. So I joined up to this freelancing site. I'd set up a project, and this one guy, put in his bid, and he seemed really good. He seemed to know what to do and how to do it. And, I went through extensive checking out his business, all that sort of stuff. But about halfway through the project, he started getting really insistent about me paying him before the project was done. But he hadn't hadn't done even half of what was expected to him. So I said no, because, you know, I'm a woman that knows how to stand up for her rights as well. He kept on putting more and more pressure on me. And then as time went on, it got more and more and more abusive. I ended up going to Freelancer and saying, look, this guy's asking me for money. He hasn't done the work. And they did a mediation, and they ended up siding with me. So I just paid him for the amount that he'd done. And then I got the rest of the money back because it was being held in escrow. You would think it would be over then. Well, no, this guy continued to abuse me, to bully me. And then after that, after he lost, he got, you know, even worse. And the kind of messages he was sending me, and email, he sent me through the Freelancer site at first. Again, I was taking screenshots. He started emailing me. I was taking screenshots, and I was sending them to Freelancer saying, this guy is actually abusing me online. And eventually they did kick him off the software so that he couldn't actually have an account there. That didn't stop him. Then he found me on Facebook, and he started creating profiles in my name. He was private messaging. So he'd go through my friends list, and then he was private messaging my friends as me, telling them I was a prostitute for $200 an hour. He created Facebook pages in my name, you know, in my business name, I must say, with sexually derogative images, putting my face on naked women, basically trying to really destroy. And he'd send me emails saying, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to destroy your reputation. You're going to wish you were dead and you never existed. And we kept on, my friends and I, we kept on reporting because this behavior was going on and on. And Facebook weren't doing a thing about it. They weren't removing him. They weren't taking down their pages. They'd keep on coming back saying, this does not go against our, you know, community standards. And we were like, what the? I mean, this man is, you know, literally victimizing me and abusing me. And it wasn't until, because I've been so active in the media, I had friends in the media, and they reached out and said, hey, we want to help. Can we do a story on this? I know this is very personal, but can we do a story on this? And I'm like, you know what, at this point, go ahead. You know, it's already happening all in public. My friends and family already know about it and what he's doing. I've got nothing to hide. So they did a story on it. And it was interesting that as soon as they rang Facebook asking for comment, poof, suddenly the pages disappeared and the profile disappeared. But then that didn't stop him, even then. So then he started listing my details on Turkish master hacking sites. So suddenly I had this influx of hundreds of men doing the same thing. They were hacking into my websites. You know, just when I'd get one website under control, another website would go down. It was just phenomenal. And I was getting the emails. And it got to the point, like, I'm a pretty strong person, but it got to the point where the bullying and the awfulness and atrociousness of what was being written to me in the emails was so much that I knew I had to screenshot them. I knew I had to keep a document, because we were dealing with the local police here in New Zealand at the time. But I knew that I emotionally just wasn't strong enough to read one more email that said one more terrible, awful, derogatory thing about myself. So I ended up having to get my sister to basically go through all comments, to read my emails, to screenshot, to document, and then she put them away in a little hidden file so that I didn't have to actually read them, because it affected me dramatically. I retired from offline. I went completely silent. I didn't even feel safe speaking up or using my voice, even because I created a new Facebook profile under a different name. I have been living under that new name since that event happened. I have not been able to use my real name. And I just put a very certain number of friends that I really trusted into that profile. But even then, I still didn't feel comfortable, you know, sharing anything about my life. And so I retired from online. I've been in hiding for 7 years. It got to the point where I had such bad PTSD and anxiety and panic. I couldn't even leave my own home for years. And there was like 3 places I could go. One was the local supermarket, always went to the same supermarket, always had my kids or a friend with me. The other place was a local cafe that knew me by name. So whenever anyone needed to meet me, I'd say, hey, let's go to this cafe, because I felt comfortable. They knew my name. I knew all the staff there, and it was a safe zone. And the third place was my church. But even in my church, I still felt unsafe because there's so many faces there, and you just don't know, when you're looking at the faces, who's against me or who's going to try and attack me. So I struggled with going to church, but I still needed that connection. So I kept on going for through that time. Now it's only been in the last, so that's 7 years. So I started another business, which is the kids slumber party and picnic styling business. And I got great success. But the interesting thing about that was that I never put myself online. I hid behind the corporate brand. I would never do sort of, face pictures or videos or things like that, because I still didn't feel safe. But what it did do is it actually started healing me to the point where I could go into a different environment. So I'd go into people's homes. I'd always have my kids with me, or friends, but I'd go into people's homes and I'd set up their parties and stuff. So little by little, I started to heal. I had counseling obviously as well, and then what happened is that a friend of mine had a vicious cyber attack too, and I remember just thinking, this is not right, this is just so unfair that my friend is, and I rose up with a righteous anger about it. And that's when I really developed my strength and my backbone, whereas when it was happening to me, I feel like I kind of curled into a ball and couldn't cope with it. I found the strength in speaking out and helping her to get through what she was going through. And that has forever changed the trajectory of my life, because I've realized that one of my, my platforms, or one of my really deep beliefs is that I am here to protect women. And that's why I said, you mentioned before about, being a tribute in the online Hunger Games. And that's honestly how I feel. Like I was the tribute. I went through what I went through, but I went through it with a purpose. And that is so that I would know, and so that mantle of protection for women online was installed on me, because I've conquered that. I've overcome that. So now I'm here and I'm helping other women stay safe online, and being the voice where maybe they can't be the voice for themselves. So that basically, in a nutshell, that's story.
Wow. I just, reading it and then hearing it, it's just like, you don't realize how quick it can happen to you, right? Like we're online so much, and we tell our kids, be careful, but we as adults, sometimes we just kind of like, oh, la-di-da, we give a different parameter for our children instead of ourselves, right? And so I think for our listeners, it's really important that those same kind of settings we do for our children, we need to be carrying it to ourselves too. I know last week I took my friend's son to the dentist, and I'm sitting there, and I was actually online taking like a questionnaire. It was a DISC profile. So I was doing this profile question and answer, and all of a sudden my phone is like blowing up. I've got my hairdresser going, hey, are you online right now? And I'm like, no. And then I have a friend who I met in Canada who for 35 days, we had just finished doing meditation. She was a meditation coach. She was teaching me how to meditate. And she's like, are you online right now? And I'm like, no, why is everybody asking me this, right? And the person, like, she screenshot me. She was getting messages from this person who created this Instagram account with my profile and one of my pictures. And they were really like writing like they were me. It's like they had studied how I wrote and how I write on Facebook or wherever. And they were writing like me, because if I looked, I go, wow, that does sound like me, right? And I was like, oh my gosh. So like I reported it right away. I find, what you said about Facebook too, I find that very interesting. And it gets really frustrating because, the things that they let go through and the things they don't let go through just frustrates me, because, I really think there's all kinds of conversations I'm sure that you're having too. And with some of the contacts you have, that they need to be held accountable in some way for the things they, how they promote things, whether it's political, whether it's sexual, whatever it is, because they've got a big influence and they know it. They can't act like they don't know it. And, people like you, the things that happen, you're not the only one, I'm sure. You won't be the last one, right? So, like we were kind of joking earlier that I think, they know what we're looking for because these things pop up and for whatever reason they do because the way we look and everything like that. But I think there needs to be some accountability on their part for some of these things for women not to have to go through what you went through. I mean, I just can't imagine being in that moment and thinking, we think about our kids being bullied, but we as adults, and like you said, how it affected you, the PTSD and like wanting to close up and like, I just want to go hide that feeling. I mean, I could feel that when you were sharing your story and I just, those that are listening, please make sure you check out Becky because she's got some great information. I downloaded some of her stuff as well. But so today, Becky, so what are some of the things that you do with women to help them, hopefully not go down the same path? And then how is it today for you? Like, do you still have things pop up?
Yeah, look, because I'm having to use a totally new name, and I do that, and I've just got to backtrack here. My whole life before this happened was under a different name. So my book is under a different name. My media appearances is under a different name. So in one respect, I feel like I've lost a lot of my back life as a result of what happened to me. But in another respect, I'm quite excited because I am reinventing myself, and I'm reinventing myself with a mission and a purpose that I think is really necessary for today. And on your story too, these scammers, they are incredible manipulators. And I think people think that scammers are just people that have nothing else to do. No, they can be sitting in your profile. Maybe you've added someone as a friend who has been a friend of a mutual friend, and you've been like, oh yeah, they seem okay, I'll add them, and that us two know this person. But how do you know that they haven't been a friend of a mutual friend, and they sit on your profile or in your pages for a long time, watching, learning, finding out how you talk, and they're getting more and more and more sophisticated in how they actually target people by, as you in your instance, then following your friends and using your friends because your friends trust you. So they basically take on that mantle of trust and can talk those other people into whatever they want, whether it's money or anything. So I just want to really hone that in today, that, these are sophisticated criminals that could be just watching, waiting, learning. And that is why it is so important to be really careful about, especially who you bring on your personal Facebook, like personal page, personal profile, because the amount of information that you feel comfortable sharing with your friends, you just don't know who else is watching that information as well. But sorry, I've forgotten your question because
I want to say something on that too. One thing that I do, I'm really, so my Facebook page, I really just use it. It's my personal page, but I use it more for my business because I'm one of those believers. I don't need to put my personal stuff. You don't need to know what I'm drinking and, I'm on vacation and things like that. I'll show you after I get back or what have you, but I'm really big about that. And then I'm also really big about, if you send me a friend request, I have this standard comment. I'll go PM you. I'm like, hey, thank you so much for your friend request. I always like to know how I'm connected to the person requesting. Hey, can you share how we are connected? How do we know one another, right? And so if they don't answer the way I feel comfortable, I'll say, you know what, thanks so much for following me. At this time I'm trying to limit, because as you know, Facebook lets us only have so many friends. So I'm trying to really limit. Please follow me on my business page, right? Or something. And then that way, it's a little bit more controlled for me. And I do that on Instagram, and even with Clubhouse. Like right now, Clubhouse is growing, and you and I were talking before we went on about, how much Clubhouse is growing, and we're making great connections. And what I like, you and I were saying too, is that you can hear the voice on the other side. It doesn't mean that they're not, you're going to get some scammers in there, but for the most part, you have a lot easier way of checking them and fact checking them. I feel like, because, if I hear your voice, I like you, I'm going to your Instagram and checking you out. And if you don't have a website or something I can follow you on, then I'm like, don't know if I want to follow you, so, but I love that. So my question for you, that what we're finishing up on was, so today, it's sad that you had to go through all of that to reinvent yourself, because so many times, I do self-care, and so many times you talk about, you could always reinvent your self-care. You can always reinvent putting yourself first, right? But to physically have to say, I have to close that chapter and start anew here. And then with your background, right? Because you're an adoptee, and you are an adopted with a beautiful family. And, you know, we were talking about earlier about you're raised by parents that are white, and you're a mixed race child. So tell us, like, having to go through, those are two big things that you've had to go through, like you being raised, and then now you have to reinvent yourself. And, you know, we both know, I know from being a mom of an adopted child of color, of mixed race color, that the things he goes through, I can't imagine having to, the challenges that you have that from being an adoptee, and then this challenge, like bridging them together. So how has that been for you?
Yeah, look, I'm one of the lucky ones. So my parents, my birth mother, sorry, I'll start there. She was 17 when she got impregnated and 18 when she had me. And her father was quite racist and wouldn't accept a Black baby coming into the family. So she knew that in having the child, she was going to have no family support and she's going to be all alone. She was a white New Zealander. And she went to the pastor of her church and said, look, I've got a baby. I really want to adopt it out, but I want it to be in a lovely Christian family. And so that pastor went to, they have things there called ministers' fraternals, where the pastors all come together from all over New Zealand and they, you know, do conferences and stuff. And so he put the word out, and my parents were both there. And, you know, it's interesting how God works, because, you know, both of them had words that they wanted to adopt a little Black baby, but they hadn't spoken to each other about it. So when this pastor came to them, you know, instantly both my parents raised their hand and then looked at each other. It's like, what, you know, and because they thought they were going to have to convince the other person about adopting a little Black baby. But, you know, it just worked out so perfectly. And all of my siblings were real siblings, like, you know, blood siblings of my parents. So I was the last one and the only one that was of mixed race. Growing up, you know, it was hard. From a very early age, I had this understanding that I'm different, that no matter how I try and act the way I'm supposed to act, I'm always just going to never fit in. And in New Zealand at that stage, it was quite a white society. And so church, everywhere we went, there were just white people, you know, and a lot of the places we lived in my life, it was a very white-centric society. So I always kind of felt like I didn't fit in. Even in my family life, there were parts of my personality that were just not like my brothers and sisters. I mean, I was loud, I was dramatic, I was, you know, prone to, you know, having hissy fits and stuff like that, whereas maybe the others weren't so much, because in my family we were definitely taught children should be seen and not heard. And because my dad was a pastor, there was also a higher sort of standard of how I should behave and react. And you know, I always got, you know, don't get me wrong, my parents are wonderful, I love them and respect them so much, but you know, I always got shushed. You know, it's like I couldn't speak. I was too loud. Even when I speak like now, you know, I would always be told, shh, quieten down. We're right here next to you. But what they didn't understand is my, you know, my levels of speaking and how, you know, vivacious and bubbly. It was actually a part of my heritage, of my ethnicity. It wasn't that I was being naughty or that I was, you know, just trying to get all the attention on myself. So they kind of didn't understand that part of my heritage. And it was, I'll go back a little bit more. So my parents were amazing at being inclusive throughout my life. So whenever there would be like I remember one day they found out about an African choir that was traveling around Australia. We were living in Australia at the time. And so they made the effort to drive us 2 hours away to go and experience this African concert with this African choir, because they wanted me to know that that this was my heritage, this is who you are, type of thing. But for me, I didn't want anything to do with my African heritage at all for years and years and years and years, like, because that was what made me different. So I abhorred it. I abhorred my skin color. I abhorred the fact that I was different, because all I wanted to do was to fit in, was to feel like I belong. So as a way of trying to create that control over my life, I totally rejected any part of my African heritage because I just wanted to be white. And it wasn't until I was about 13 years old that I sort of started, 13, 14, I started asking questions about my birth mother and about my African heritage. And there was an African pastor that came to our church, and so Dad was like, oh, cool, an African pastor, he can stay with us. So we had this African pastor in our home for a few days, and it was just amazing just to actually be able to converse and to learn, because he was from Zimbabwe, and at that point I didn't know whether I was Zimbabwe or Zambian, because when I was born they were both linked as Rhodesia, so I could have been from either country. Zambian. He was Zambian. So anyway, he came around, and then he basically gave me an open invitation that when I'm ready, I can go to Zambia, and I will be like his daughter, and he will have me in his church, and I can stay with him, and he'll look after me. And so that opens up this opportunity for me to go to Zambia. And about 3 years later, when I was 17 years old, I had this amazing opportunity where I went to Zambia all by myself. I was a volunteer in a school over there in one of the slum areas. I stayed with one of his church members. I was very involved with his church and his music team and stuff. But the funny thing that happened is that as soon as I stepped off the plane, I saw all these black faces around me. Instead of feeling like I belonged, I panicked because I'd been so used to living in a culture where there were all these white, and suddenly I was in this culture where there was just black everywhere. And it was like, I even then, I kind of felt like I didn't belong, so I don't belong in the white society. I don't belong sort of in this black society because I've been brought up white, and my thinking and my mindset was very white, and the way I speak is very white. But one thing happened while I was over there is that as I developed relationships with people that became my dearest friends in Zambia, I realized that suddenly I wasn't the loudest person in the room anymore. I wasn't the only one speaking loudly and getting excited and celebrating like everyone else. And I realized that the things that I thought were kind of making me stand out or making me different from everyone else in the white society were actually just a part of my ethnic heritage and my and that was just so fulfilling and just very validating for me to discover that it wasn't that I was too loud or too vibrant or too dramatic. It was just that was a part of who I was that I just didn't understand, having been brought up in the culture that I am. And then my parents, like I said, they have been so all-encompassing of me finding my ethnicity, so that what they actually did is when I was 13, they tracked down the pastor that had originally sort of brought up I've got a parishioner that wants to adopt a child, and without me knowing, they actually tracked down my birth mum, and she was now living in Australia and had married and had 2 other children, but she'd just been in New Zealand as a part of a family trip. So the pastor knew and had her contact details. So Mum and Dad got into contact with her, and she was like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to know, who my daughter is. Yes, I've never forgotten her. And so because her parents were still in New Zealand, but she was in Australia, she told her parents. And so we ended up going to visit her parents, but she warned Dad that, my dad might not be as accepting of Rebecca as, because of these issues. But I tell you what, I think I was about 13 at the time, and within half an hour of being in his house, he just my granddad on her side just warmed to me, and I was sitting in his lap, and he just utterly adored me. And it was like a real sort of healing for him, I think, too, to have a grandchild that was color when he's had so many issues in the past years of, colored people and stuff. So that was just one thing. And then a few years later, after I'd been to Africa when I was 17, Dad thought, well, this is good. We've already found one parent. Why don't we try and find the other one? So he went back to the university. We didn't even know his last name, my birth dad's last name, but we knew his first name, and we knew what he was studying at Christchurch University when he had a one-night stand with my biological mum. So he went to the university, and he was able to actually find out the last name, and then he went to the alumni and said, look, this is the situation. I've adopted this man's daughter. We would like to make contact. And the university said, we can't give you his details, but if you send a letter to him through us, we'll send it to his alumni address. And they did. So Dad sent a letter to my father, Patrick, and they sent it off to Patrick. Patrick obviously wasn't living at that address anymore, because this is like, 13, 14, 15 years ago, but his brother still was. So the letter did actually get to my birth father, who is in Zimbabwe. So I then found out that I'm actually a Zimbabwean.
Wow.
As a result of that, I was able to go over there. I have amazing relationships with my half brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. And in fact, they're all over the world. They're in South Africa. One even lives here in New Zealand. And it's been like a really beautiful kind of adoption story of me finding who I am, but in the sort of the crux of the two cultures type of thing. But I was really lucky to have such loving and open parents, that they were so confident and secure in their own being my parents, that they were able to allow these two other people to come in and share the joy of my life as well. So yeah,
that's so amazing. And so look at what you did. Like, you brought these two, I mean, to talk about your biological grandfather, and just, I can't imagine that healing that he had, and realizing, and I'm sure in some ways he had some regrets too, that he, had said to your biological mom about what he had said about not bringing you home. But look what you've done. You've healed like them, and you've brought these two families together. Right. And so it's just amazing. Kind of a funny story when you're talking about, the wanting to belong, and, seeing, the loudness and that's your ethnic background. Right. So when we adopted Matthew and we were able to bring him home, he was a month old. And so my younger son came a couple years later through in vitro. And I remember we had Nate home, and he was a baby, and we were changing him. And we really, when I first brought Matt home, let me just tell you that backstory. My mom went with me to pick up Matthew from his birth mom. So Matthew his birth mom had a family picked out for him, but because she was in the middle of a divorce in California, she not only had to sever the rights of the bio father, but she would have to sever the rights of soon-to-be ex-husband. And so this family that she picked out, which happened to be a mixed race couple, they couldn't afford the attorneys that were going to be needed. So she had 2 weeks to find a family for Matthew, or the state was going to find him, right? So we got the call. We got a fax picture of him over the fax machine, because we didn't have cell phones back then, right? And we're like, okay, yeah. So I never ever forget, we're driving down this mountain in San Bernardino, California, and Matt's in the back seat. And my mom looks at me and she says, "Are you going to tell Matthew he's adopted?" And I was like, I looked at her and I said, "Well, now, Mom, I think I kind of have to tell him, because he is a little different in nationality than I am. And when he looks at Chuck and I, we are a little different color, right?" I'm like, so it was really important for us to make sure he had that secure, like, center place where he came from, right? So we kept in contact with his biological mom. And at 5 years old, he remembers meeting her at 5 years old. We went and met like a Chuck E. Cheese, I think it was. And then, but when we brought Nate home, when Nate was only a baby, Matt was about 2 years old, maybe 2.5. And I remember having Nate, and I was changing his diaper, and Matt said, "Mom, why is he a different color than me?" Right. And I was like, oh, this is a great question. Now, how do you answer so a 2-year-old can understand? Right. So I said, well, Matt, you are Czechoslovakian and Haitian. So you have 2 different colors. That means that Czechoslovakian is very white, and then the Haitian is very black. So your 2 colors are mixed together. And that's why in our world, we say, you're a mixed race. You're 2 different beautiful colors brought together. Your brother, he's Italian and German, so he's white, so, and he was like, okay, he understood that. Well, now the reverse side of that is our youngest one, he had problems like talking at first, right? And he would talk, but he wasn't a talker. But he used to do this thing where he would scratch his arm, right? And I would be like, why are you scratching your arm? It was so much, Becky, that we were going to bring him to the doctors. I was worried he had autism or something. That's how badly he was doing it. So one day we were in Virginia, and they were out playing in the snow. And Nate came in and he's just like bawling his eyes out. And this thing with the arm, like he's scratching his arm. I'm like, Nate, you have got to tell me, why are you scratching your arms? I want to be the same color as brother. So he thought he could scratch his arm to be the same color as brother. So it was just, two different points of view on that, wanting to be the same, like we should all in this whole world, like look at each other. We are all the same. We have the same thing on the inside. We're just beautifully different on the outside, right? And so I just love that you were able to bring the two worlds together. I just think it's just so amazing. And I was telling you before about my son and I, we've actually been talking about writing a book about raising children of different colors or ethnicity in the families, because, looking back, like you said, your parents, they drove 2 hours to bring you to, a place that would give you some connections with the choir, right? It was very important for us too, to have that same thing for Matthew. So whatever we did, I always try to make sure, like Easter, whatever the holidays were, that he had representation. I learned from my girlfriend a little bit about Kwanzaa and things like that. Like I wanted him, and so, and I always like our adoption groups and things like that. I try to make sure we were in groups that he could connect with. And so, but, for Matthew, his story is he knows where his birth mom is. His birth mom has not been forthright on who the birth father is. We have our suspicions, but we're just letting Matthew do that path on his own. And we're here for him when he's ready. Right. So, I love your story. I think it's just amazing. And that you have such this love for both families. I think it's just awesome. So I want to ask you questions. I know we're kind of getting near the end of our time here, but, so the book, The Lighter Side of Large, tell us a little bit about that book. I love that title.
So the book, I wrote it, like I'm the most romantic. I'm such a romantic buff, and I hadn't had my happy ending. So I wanted to write a novel, but I also wanted to write something that was very true to me and to my life. So it's all about navigating the world as a big woman, and also as a half white, half black. So I wrote the book. It's basically, I call it reality fiction, because most of the book is all experiences that have happened to me, but I wanted to have a happy ending. So I kind of weaved in there a little bit of a love story type of thing, because I just had to. But yeah, it was really, I wrote it as a self-help book disguised as a novel. And the feedback that I've got from it has been exactly that. They're like, I thought I was reading a novel, and then I've learned so much through just hearing your thoughts and how you've been able to grow and stuff, and your confidence through it. And so I wrote that. It was really interesting. I've always wanted to be a writer. And one day I just thought, you know what? I can keep on thinking one day, or I can go day one. When is my day one going to be? So I came up with a day one, and I started writing. So every week I set a goal for myself to write a chapter a week. It ended up taking 27 weeks, although there was a couple of weeks where it was delayed because unfortunately my adoptive father passed away from bowel cancer. So I did have a couple of weeks off, but I had my girlfriends who were reading chapter by chapter as I write, say, don't you dare let your father's death stop you from finishing this book. So I kind of forced myself back into writing it. I self-published it. I put it on Amazon. Really didn't expect much from it because it was just me expressing myself, because like I said before, for so much of my life I felt like I didn't really have a voice. I felt like I was sort of living in this in between of who am I, am I black, am I white, who am I? So this book was quite lethargic and healing for me because I was able to put all those thoughts into how I was feeling. I kind of crafted a story where the girl is part Samoan, part white, but all the same inferences that I've had being African white all came through into the book. So it ended up being a bestseller. I've been in newspapers and radio and everything for it. And then I did end up having HarperCollins actually track me down and say, we want you to write for us. But I ended up turning them down because what they were offering me was different to what I was already achieving just by self-publishing. But as I said, when I had this cyberbullying attack, it's like I could no longer kind of own the book. And I have been thinking about maybe changing the name, changing the name of the person that wrote it, and to Becky Duncan, obviously, which is what I go from now, and changing the title just so that I could relaunch it. But for me, it's like a memoir. It was like me putting my heart on the pages and just sharing things, no bullshit, exactly as they were happening to me, what I was feeling, my insecurities. And yeah, I guarantee, have you written a book yet? Like, seriously, everybody has to write a book because it's such a great and very healing experience.
I totally agree with you. First of all, I want to say, I know you found your voice. I mean, I believe your voice has always been there. And I love that you didn't let any of these things that have come up, stop that beautiful voice you have from coming forward so we all can hear it and receive it. No, I've written 3 books, so they're all collaborative ones, but I'm in the process of writing one, like I said, with my son. It will be a collaborative one too. We want to work with families and share their experience, but it will be our directive, right? The other ones have all been directed by somebody else kind of doing it. And I've got a great publisher. She's amazing. She's in Texas, and it's called You Impact. So they've been amazing. So really, really great there. But yeah, so I love it's, why not write a sequel to it, right? Like write it.
I have actually written the sequel. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, but again, it all kind of happened when all this cyber stuff went on. So it's there. It's sitting on my computer still, ready to finish it and launch it. But I just haven't quite got there, I guess. And life happens, and my direction at the moment has obviously changed to be about teaching women, protecting women online. But I'm not saying you can't have I've got my hands in lots of different pots, and I think variety is the spice of life. So I will get back to it. I will. But
I totally agree. Variety is the spice of life, and I love what you just said, because it so aligns with we all as women, we put everybody else first. We tend to do that, right? You're a mom, you know how that is. And so I think it's really awesome that you're like going, I have my goals, I have my dreams. And that's what I do when I work with women, is like, you need to put yourself first. You need to take care of your self-care. You need to be, making sure that you are important guiltlessly, right? Like we're doing, for anybody who's listening, we're doing a free retreat April 12th through 18th. It's a self-care retreat online, all via Zoom. It's totally free to come on and join us. And we're going to talk about guiltless self-care, including how to meditate, how to go from the couch to moving, whatever that is for you. And really, and owning it and understanding that you deserve to put yourself first, right? So I love that you're doing that. I think that's just so amazing. So one of the things that
so many women don't give themselves the permission to make the choice to self-care. So I think that is such an important subject to teach them, because if you can't give yourself the permission to look after yourself first, then you're actually going to be useless to looking after everybody else if you're getting so depleted. So I'm so excited that you're doing that. That's going to be an amazing
yes,
event.
Thank you. And it's exactly right. We come in last, and we can't take care of those people that we are putting before us the way we want to, right? So I love that you shared that. So a couple of things. So before we close up, I was sharing with Becky before we hopped on that we have these cards. My good friend Carol Gill, she did these cards. They're called Better Questions, Better Life. So you can go to betterquestionsbetterlife.com and you can pull a card out. There's lots of cards here, as you can see. So there's like my card I put out today. It says, what if I were great? And I know that I am great because I know that God's put me on here to do great things. And I have to work every day to make sure I listen internally what he wants me to put out, because I already know I am great. But so I'm going to just kind of go, and you're going to tell me when to stop. And I'm going to show you the card that's in the bottom. So you just tell me when to stop.
Okay, stop.
Okay. So Becky's card says, how have I surprised myself? How have you surprised yourself?
Oh, wow. How have I surprised myself? I think it comes way, I've surprised myself, I think, by the strength that I'm now finding coming back online, living my life out loud again. Because 7 years ago, like I told you, I never dreamed I would be able to do this again, ever in a million years. I was like, nope, not going to put my life out there, not going to put myself out there ever again, because I get attacked when I put myself out there. Whereas now I'm coming at it with a, you know what? I'm here. Scam me if you can. Come on, boys. Bring it on. You know, like the way that I have just found my truth, found my validation and my voice and my confidence, that has surprised me. And obviously it wasn't overnight. It's taken years to get there, but I never thought that I would get here again. And look, here I am on your podcast. Here I am sharing every day to hundreds of people all over the world, thousands of people all over the world. So I think that's my biggest surprise of late, that I'm even here doing this.
I love it. I love it. All right. So the last question of the day that Becky, I'm going to ask you, because everybody knows I encourage everybody to find their inner pearl to greatness. So we all are this beautiful oyster that's waiting to be opened by us, because we all have this beautiful pearl inside. So if you were to say one thing, what is your greatness? What's your beautiful inner greatness that you have that you bring out to the world? Or maybe you just share with your children. What would you say that is?
You know, I think mine is that, oh gosh, how do I put it? My inner greatness is that I can just bring people together into such a feeling of fun and lightness. And, you know, that's my gift to the world. You know, I can talk about serious things, but I can talk about it in a way that is light and fun and is not going to depress people as well. So I think my whole personality is about just fun and freedom and release and authenticity. So it's just that whole fun, joy, that's it. Joy is my gift to the world. And
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's just amazing. And I can feel the joy and everything that you have coming through. So I'm so glad, Becky, you're on today. Tell everybody how they can find you. Where do they find you on social media? Tell everybody where they can find you.
Absolutely. Well, I am the cyber self-defense coach. On my social media, I go under Becky Duncan or The Becky Duncan. So Instagram, it's The Becky Duncan. And on Facebook, it's The Becky Duncan. I also have a website, which is Cyber Self-Defense Coach. But defense is spelled with a C, because here in New Zealand and Australia, we spell defense with a C, .com. So cyberselfdefense.com. I have some great things coming up that I'm excited to share. I've got a $27 webinar coming up, which is teaching women the 5 simple tips that they can do to keep themselves really safe online. And I would love to have people there and just to share what I've learned to stay safe online, because, you know, just some simple tips can actually get you about 85% safer online than if you're not doing them at all. So I welcome everyone to come. DM me if you've got questions. I will respond to everyone. I'm just so happy to be here and to be able to help protect and empower women online.
I love it. Thank you so much, Becky, for being on today. My name is Pearl, and you've been listening to Conversations with Pearl, and you can find us at wsliving.com. Again, that's wsliving.com, which stands for Women's Successful Living. Have an amazing day, and please go find your inner pearl to greatness.